Mrs. Karel, una de les preguntes que de ben segur ens fem molts de nosaltres en el marc d'aquest congrés és com creu vostè que podria afectar el sistema arxivístic belga una hipotètica separació de Flandes del Regne de Bèlgica? I també una altra pregunta a les Mrs. Hana Habjan, que el sistema arxivístic eslovè té menys nivells d'estructura, com ha parlat. On són, dins aquesta estructura del sistema arxivístic, els arxius municipals d'Eslovènia? Bé, si vol començar, senyor Mrs. Karel Velle.
The transfer of the archives to the regions, the integral transfer from the federal archives to the regions is not, for the moment, a political issue, because it's linked to so many other issues, so many other political sensitive files. What we should do with other federal institutions like the big museums, the Royal Library, for instance. The federal archives are not the only institutions which is on the list for separation. People talk already of separation of the federal cultural and scientific institutions since decades. And there are several options. I'm a Flemish guy. I have options too in my mind, of course, but it's quite difficult because of the shared history in Belgium. We have a complex history. We have a complex archival funds. It's not so easy to cut them in 2 or 3 pieces. Certainly not the archives. And that is it is against the archival principles and archival laws. If politicians, and probably they will decide this on a Monday morning on 5 o'clock, after long negotiations, after elections, this is not a joke, it happens in Belgium, a Monday morning on 5 o'clock, and they decide to separate and to split up the cultural and scientific institutions of the federal government. I'm very practical and very pragmatic. For the personnel, there's no problem. You devise this in 3 pieces or in 2 pieces, and so it is. You sign, and it's clear. The buildings, they have already been evaluated 10 times. They know exactly in the north, in the south, what the cost is of the buildings, what the operational cost is every year. So that is rather simple to manage. That's not the problem. The problem is the archival law, the application of certain regulations like control, surveillance of archives, and the future management and the budget impact, the financial impact of the future management of the shared history, of the shared archives, which are dating from the 70th, 80th, 19th century. The problem is not the archives who are kept, who are transferred now, that are contemporary archives, which are created by institution X or Y, and it's clear, it's Flemish, it's Brussels, and so on. But we are talking about a heritage of 250 kilometers of historical archives, on which not only the Flemish and the Walloon of the French-speaking people should take in account or decide, but also the German-speaking, also the people of Brussels. So we don't negotiate with 2 partners. In Belgium, you always negotiate with at least 6 partners. So there are a lot of actors around the table. It's like in UNESCO. like the discussions of the Memory of the World program, I guess. If this is an answer on your question.
Well, in Slovenia, we have state archives only on 2 levels. On the Republic level, which is the Archives of the Republic of Slovenia, and 6 regional archives functioning, therefore, on regional level. These take in also archives of municipalities. The Slovene archival legislation stipulates that municipalities are entitled to their own archives, but so far they have not yet exercised this right. Only our capital city, Ljubljana, the municipality is currently thinking about establishing their own archives. So, and Mr. Velle mentioned previously when he was talking about Belgium that Belgium is a small state. Well, in Slovenia there's only 2 million of us, so it's very different.
Més preguntes?
Sí, bona tarda. Jo volia preguntar a la senyora Hana Habjan d'Eslovènia el següent. Si no he entès malament, hi ha una dissolució formal de l'antiga república de Iugoslàvia i queda un patrimoni arxivístic compartit dels antics arxius estatals o de la república federativa, si no he entès malament. Pel que jo conec de Belgrad, bona part dels arxius històrics de l'antic regne i de la república federativa, la república de Tito, per dir-ho d'alguna manera, estan conservats en un arxiu que es diu Arxiu d'Història de Iugoslàvia, que està a Belgrad. Pel que conec, aquest centre està bastant obsolet. Jo voldria preguntar, primer, si aquest patrimoni arxivístic que està en aquest centre d'arxiu en concret o en altres de Belgrad, qui es fa càrrec del manteniment, de la gestió i de la conservació d'aquest patrimoni. I segon, si els investigadors o els arxivers de les repúbliques que han succeït a Iugoslàvia tenen un accés lliure i il·limitat, amb facilitat, a tot aquest patrimoni comú, en concret aquest arxiu, i si els fons s'estan digitalitzant.
Well, first of all, to the first question, it's basically Serbia who is still in charge of these archives, even though the former states did not agree on common heritage yet. They still have to agree on it. They still have to make a list of these archives, and then they have to decide based on stipulations in 2001 agreement where these archives will be located, because it doesn't say that they have to be necessarily located in the country of origin, that is Belgrade in Serbia. So at present, Serbia is still the one maintaining it. As to access, access is easier for representatives of Slovene archives, but for researchers to these archives, they have to comply with Serbian archival legislation. And also, well, it basically depends on the political climate in the country as to what is the access to these archives, because the director of the Archives of Yugoslavia is appointed by the government, and sometimes he or she is more cooperative and sometimes less. And consequently, also access is a bit more difficult. It has improved, the situation has improved in the last years, but still it's very difficult. It's still a very slow process. Amongst other things, Slovene archives proposed that a cultural attaché would be nominated for these archives in Belgrade, but it's been rejected by Serbian authorities that it's not necessary and that all things can be organized through the representatives of the Slovene Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And indeed, the process of cataloging these archival records is such that Slovene archivists have to register with our embassy in the Belgrade who contacts the archives of Yugoslavia or other former federal archives, who in turn organize the meeting and prepare materials for cataloging. And also, as it's already been mentioned, certain archives are not available. Also, Serbia has greatly emphasized the bombardment of NATO, of Belgrade, and stipulated that many archives were destroyed during this bombardment. So it's, I suppose it really depends on the fact from which state you come from regarding the access to archives.
Alguna altra pregunta?
Joan Boades, Arxiu Municipal de Girona. Serà una pregunta per les dues persones que hi ha a la taula, però un comentari en tot cas al que ha dit el senyor Karel Velle. Suposo que a partir d'ara els documents nascuts ja en digital facilitaran molt les coses quan es plantegi en un país o en un altre una hipotètica separació. Per tant, això serà una millora. De cara a la pregunta que volia formular és el perfil dels nous professionals, tant a Eslovènia com a Bèlgica, és un perfil no dels arxivers ja tradicionals i consolidats, sinó els nous professionals que estan incorporant-se a la feina d'arxiver, procedeixen encara de les ciències, diguem-ne, humanes o estan més vinculats a les noves tecnologies? Gràcies.
I forgot to answer one of your questions. Also, Serbia, and that is former federal archives, are having difficulties with digitalization due to lack of financial resources. As for your question, predominantly in Slovene archives there are still people coming from social sciences area, but nevertheless there's been an increase on informatization, and therefore an increasing number of people who work are now from this field of area. Well, we do encounter problems regarding combining the principles of archivistics with principles of digitalization, that is informatization, because sometimes we have difficulties finding a common language. So.
You asked two questions, Johan. The first one, yes, you are right. Due to different factors, due to the financial situation of several governments, even in Belgium, due to the evolution of the digitization of society in general, digital preservation issues and so on, and due to some opportunities like Apex, for instance, more and more politicians and even archivists, of course, from the north, from the south, from Brussels, German speaking parts of Belgium are saying the split up, the separation of the institutions, that's a non-discussion. It's over. It's history. We should collaborate. We should collaborate to try to do good things with a lower budget level, at a lower budget level. So this new movement for an appeal for more collaboration is more and more important. Also on the political level, and that's new. That's the dates of beginning of this year. The separation discussion, the discourse we heard 10 years ago, 50 years ago, and just before the last election in Belgium, that's finished. And I think it's finished for a couple of years. What you were saying, digital archiving and the digital world is probably a solution for Belgium. I think it's a part of the solution. indeed, but because even the politicians are saying it's too much money to do it separately. 6 times doing the same. Let's bring our expertise and our budgets together. Let's try to have a good collaboration between the archivists, and that's why we recently signed, for the first time since the Belgian Revolution in the 19th century, an agreement with the German-speaking colleagues. It's a small community, small ministry. 72,000 people are living in German-speaking part of Belgium. But for me personally, it's a very important step forward. It's the first time in a federal state that a department, an agency of a federal government, is going around the table and talking about what can I do for you and what can you do for me. It's a very simple text, 2 pages, and we are. It is a step forward for the future, and I hope that we can do copy-paste with other agreements with the people of Brussels, Ministry of the Flemish Departments, and so on. So pragmatically, the politicians are talking in the Parliament years and years and years, and we as public agents, as responsible for the archives, we try to manage it on the field by being pragmatic. And the second question about profiles of professions, the profiles are still classic. Normally the archival services are recruiting historians. I always say polyvalent generalist, how do you say that? Généraliste en français, I don't know the word in English. So historians, well-prepared, doctoral degree, a degree of archival sciences. But we are convinced that for the future we need more profiles, other profiles in the field of course, digitization and profiles in the field of project management. Very important for mass digitization. We need people who can manage huge, important projects that are not necessarily the city archivists. And even the archivists of the Federal Archives are responsible for small services. That's a special profile we need. We need people specialized in communication and presentation on the web. People who are inventing new, innovative interfaces. That's far from our profile. When we were at university, we got courses on the history of archives, history of institutions, very important, history on legal issues. I give the course on archival law, of course. That's my dada. But we need other profiles, and that should not be or are not necessary archivists. It can be IT people, sociologists, people who are have special skills in management, human resources management. Very important. If you have signed a collaboration agreement with the other community or the other region, and you have decided on several projects, you should recruit a project manager to manage this. And it can be an archivist, if you have an archivist in the institution which has the ambition to do it, why not? But more and more we need specialized people who we can recruit, but which we can also hire for 3 months, a year, why not? That's the evolution I look to in Belgium recently. For the profile of archivists? I have already responded.
Ja, sí, respons. Alguna pregunta més? No? Bé, doncs... Aquí també, el perfil professional dels arxivers, responent al que diu el senyor Karel, Velle. Aquí també el perfil professional dels arxivers sol ser d'historiadors, de ciències socials, però amb especialitzacions cada vegada més, l'especialització arxivística, per suposat, i amb especialitzacions cada vegada més de gestió de documents electrònics, de gestió de documents en imatge, etc., documents digitals. O sigui que aquí les especialitzacions aquestes es basen també en el perfil professional de sempre. Bé, no tenim cap més pregunta, ja que els tenim aquí, que a més són experiències molt importants, potser, i molt interessants. No? Bé, doncs moltes gràcies, Mr. Karel, Velle i Mrs. Hana, Habjan, per compartir amb els arxivers catalans aquestes dues experiències tan interessants i les grans aportacions que ens heu donat. Gràcies.